Coming up on Regarding Men, blaming men to help them. Cafe stabs men in the back.
Hello there, friends, and welcome to Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard and where red pill isolation comes to die a fiery death. I'm Janice Fiamengo. I'm the author of the Fiamengo File, and I'm joined here by my two good friends, Paul Elam of paulelam.com and Tom Golden of Men Are Good.
Men Are Good.
And today we're going to look at a video clip that's taken from a longer interview between a representative of an organization called CAFE, that's the Canadian Association for Equality, and a man named Cameron Gibson, who is a registered clinical counselor and the head of an organization called Manifest Counselling for Men, which is in Vancouver, BC, in my neck of the woods. Now, CAFE, the Canadian Association for Equality, is a men's advocacy organization. It's interested in talking about men's issues, the issues that affect men and boys. It has opened a center in Toronto, the Center for Men and Families. It has another center in Ottawa. And before we begin, it's worth saying that there are many good people who work for CAFE. I have lots of friends who are involved with CAFE, wonderful people. One of them is Paul Nathanson, the author who has published those 4 fantastic books about misandry with Catherine Young. David Shackleton is a very good friend of mine, was involved with CAFE for a long time. Lots of people sincerely dedicated to the welfare of men and boys. However, we have chosen this clip, which was just released a couple of days ago, because it is so disturbing in what it reveals about some of the partners of CAFE, those with whom CAFE is willing to ally itself in offering services allegedly to help men. And as we'll show as we go through, this is a short clip, about 2.5 minutes of these two guys talking about the reaction to opening a clinic to serve men, to treat mental health issues. As you'll see as we go through this, there are an awful lot of vicious feminist presuppositions being expressed here by Cameron Gibson, the registered clinical counselor, and not challenged by the interviewer, whose name we don't know, but who seems to quite happily accept the various man-blaming and man-shaming things that Cameron Gibson has to say. So let's start looking at this clip, and then we're going to stop it and comment.
All right, let's see what he has to say.
What did people say, or what kind of reactions did you get when you said you're having a clinic specifically for men? I think that there's been a lot of attention on women's issues in the last, pretty much my whole life, at least the last 10 or 20 years. And a lot of that is warranted and it's justified and necessary. There hasn't been quite as much gender-specific attention on men. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think is behind that? And what would be your response to any possible critics who say, men don't need it?
Yeah. So we were worried from an optics perspective that we might be crucified for creating a men's clinic, and the opposite happened.
Let's stop it there.
I can say.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Well, what a way to begin.
Oh boy.
Yes, it is an auspicious way to begin, I suppose. In this, the first reaction I have to this is, let me get this right. You announced especially around a bunch of feminist friends, that you were going to do a men's program that focused on what dirtbags men are and basically how bad they are. And you were shocked that they approved of that. Um, Gosh, this has been the feminist model, and it isn't 10 or 20 years. I also really love the notion that men's issues haven't got quite as much attention as women's issues
Yeah.
have. And I mean, he says this in the same breath that he's saying we were anticipating a hateful backlash for even entertaining the idea of helping men.
Right.
Comes right after he says, well, there wasn't quite as much attention to men's issues as to women's. And I've noticed they both, thus far in the conversation, and I think typical for Cafe, are kissing the feminist ring to make sure that they have the approval of feminists before they utter anything in the world about men's issues.
Yeah.
That's my reaction to the beginning of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, why would you think that feminists who care about gender equality would have a bad reaction to a clinic focusing on men's mental health? Why would you think that? What kind of a group of people would have a bad reaction to that? Yeah, and it isn't just that there hasn't been quite as much attention paid to men's issues. It's that for years and years and years, there has been nothing for men. Men trying to escape from abusive relationships have found every shelter in the entire nation closed to them. That's the little less attention that's been paid to men. And then to say that we live in a patriarchal society that is so focused on men that a suicidal man seeking treatment is going to find himself shouted down by feminists saying that he doesn't need or deserve any help. And to say that that's evidence of living in a woman-hating and male-centering culture, which is what these two accept and promote, we're into feminist crazy right off the bat, and the bootlicking and kowtowing and the supplicating, oh, thank you so much, feminists, for allowing us to have a little clinic for men, just gets worse from here on in.
Yes,
Yes,
it does.
please, ma'am. I have another.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
All
Let's
right.
go.
Here we go.
Myself to be a feminist. I have some feminist friends, and so I started circulating some of our social media, circulating the website, and we had incredibly positive reactions. So I feel like there's allies around us in the community that are supportive of men finally getting the mental health support they actually need, because men are often at the root of a lot of the problems in society. So
Uh-oh. Men are at the root of a lot of the problems in society. What the hell? What's that about? We're going to help
This
men.
it almost sounds like you're saying a blame the victim thing there. Am I wrong?
Well, it's worse than that, Paul. It seems to
Yeah.
me. It's saying not only are you the victim, but you're the perpetrator. I mean, you're both. You know, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
And this is reminiscent. Tom, you and I have had discussions in the past, and as a matter of fact, we worked together on a piece I think that I finally finished years ago, talking about white sociology.
Right. Right.
And the premise was this comes out of the 50s, when there was a need, at least in culture at that point, a perceived need to explain the problems of Black people. And what did it boil down to? They weren't white enough. That was one of their problems. They didn't adopt white moral standards. That was one of their problems. Basically, what white sociology did, and they were teaching this in universities in the 1950s, is it told people that Black people created their own problems and nothing was done to them as a class of people. I mean, it's amazing how this, panned out this way. But the idea was that if they would just become more white, their lives would improve.
And the path to that becoming more white was to spend more time with white people.
Yes.
Just like today, we see the path for men to get better is to be more like women. You know. Oh, the other thing that got me about that, Paul, was that the researchers would deep six anything that showed that blacks did well, and would publish anything that showed that blacks did poorly. Kind of like we see with men today. You know.
Exactly what we're seeing in this godforsaken conversation
Yes.
right now.
Yes,
This
exactly right.
talk is strictly along the same lines as white sociology. This is, we're going to call this female sociology. It's very ideological in nature, but what they are saying here is that men don't have problems. Men are problems.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you're delivering mental health treatment with that type of bigoted attitude toward the people you serve, it becomes abuse. This is abuse. This is not seeking to understand the nature of men's problems. And I guarantee you, you won't hear problems like false accusations, like parental alienation, like, what happens with the suicide rate during breakups and divorces. What is happening just generally in the lives of men, unless it fits in the feminist narrative of, well, he has emotional problems because he doesn't express his feelings like women. Right back to the female sociology, the female psychology they're applying here. This, folks, is a case study in bigotry. This is not about helping men. This conversation has nothing to do with helping men. This conversation is about kissing feminist ass so that they can be allowed to continue to raise funding and promote their programs. Because if they don't kiss feminist ass, then that reaction that he allegedly expected from them from the beginning, the moment they quit kissing feminist ass and start addressing men's problems, he will get that reaction. They
Yes.
will turn on them in a heartbeat, and they will be destroyed, which explains this conversation in its entirety.
Yes, and you can tell that's exactly what's going on, because they don't really look at anything that has to do with the research that shows how men are. You know, the research that shows why men do the things they do. It's just like feminists have avoided that like the plague, and these guys seem to not know anything about precarious manhood, moral typecasting, the male hierarchy, testosterone. I mean, they don't know anything about it, and they don't seem to care. You know?
Oh, they don't, because of course
So
those
that's
things,
all they need.
those things are all toxic. And yet to think that you would talk about helping men who are struggling with mental health issues, men who have anxiety disorder, men who are suicidal, men who are struggling with a history of child abuse, to think that the first thing that would come to your mind that you want to say to communicate, and this is really, I mean, obviously this video exists because Cameron Gibson wants men to know that he's offering this service for men. And so the first thing he wants them to know is that he's a feminist. He's got lots of feminist friends, and they all agree that men are at the root of most of the problems in our society.
It's crazy, eh? That's some crazy stuff. Should we go ahead?
Yeah.
Let's dig deeper into this very shallow pool.
And tell me when you want to stop. We'll see.
Abusive relationships, alcoholism, violence to each other or to women, whichever direction it goes. So if men get support that stops them from developing into people like that,
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Uh-oh. When men get support, it stops them from becoming people like that.
Yeah.
You notice when he's describing these problems, there is not one word coming out of his mouth that shows men as anything other than perpetrators.
Yeah.
He does not acknowledge that they can be victims of anything.
No.
Or that they have things that would help you understand why they're doing the things they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. there's only two kinds of violence in the world for him. There's men being violent against other men, and there's men being violent against women. Well, he didn't mention men being violent against children. It's always men being violent, men causing problems. Imagine being a man trying to escape from an abusive situation and going and talking to him. What would he have to say within his feminist paradigm to that man? Imagine being a man who was abused by his mother throughout his childhood and is dealing with the effects of that and going and talking to this guy and knowing that his primary framework is that men cause the problems in the world and that his mandate is to intervene and to stop men from causing problems.
Because if they'll
Wow.
just change, everything would be so much better.
Yeah.
You know?
I
And
imagine him
this is-
thinking that
Go-
that's what he's doing. Sorry, Paul.
That's all right. No, I was just going to say to me, there's a deeper subtext here because this is preening also. It's not just a twisted ideological agenda that actually harms people that it alleges to try to help. This is also this gentleman standing before the world and really saying, if men will be more like me, they'll
Yeah.
be better.
It's a good point.
I'm the good man.
Yeah.
And this is always the message of obsequious, servile men who kiss the feminist ring every day of their lives. They need to project out there that sort of virtue signaling. I'm the really good one here. I know the standard, and most men don't. They've been
Yeah.
deprived of that, and I'm going to be here to help. This is all about impressing women. It's not about helping anybody. This is pathology going on right here. This guy's own lack of boundaries and lack of identity at play here, seeking approval through
Yeah.
basically kissing women's asses.
Yeah, and being so grateful to the feminists out there, to all his feminist friends who actually allowed him to advertise services that would tell men they're at the root of all problems and that the only reason to help them is to prevent them from becoming abusers.
Yeah.
This really, really is. I mean, I'm doing pretty good here. I was really boiling mad when I saw this, and I've calmed down a little. But I see this as a really particularly egregious form of abuse when you're hanging out a shingle saying, "I'm here to help people," and then saying, "As long as you recognize you're less than, and that you're
Yeah.
bad." And that you're the source of all these social ills and the problems of the world. If you take that on, like a lamb being sent out or a goat being sent out into the desert, smeared in blood, then we'll approve of you and you'll be better. This is, I mean, it's absolutely inexcusable. And it's inexcusable for Cafe to put this kind of content out there unchallenged while they're claiming to be advocates for men. This thinking about men, this misandry is one of men's biggest problems. And we can put it up whenever you want, Tom, but they did issue a very lawyerly disclaimer after the comments started going south on them about this. Can we get that graphic up?
I think you're talking about this one here.
Yes, it has such legal brio. Let me read this. This sounds just like it was written like a lawyer. And well, I want to say I agree very much with Janice. There's some great people that work at Cafe. They are not the people running Cafe. This is what we're hearing now is from people that run that organization. The opinions expressed by guests on perspectives on men are theirs alone and do not necessarily reflect those of the Canadian Association for Equality and the Canadian Center for Men. I'm not going to finish reading the rest. This is a boilerplate distancing from the content of this while they leave it up, promoting it. I'm just not buying it. This is how, I mean, and I'm not going to get into details. I've had other experiences with Cafe where this is the kind of language. Again, whenever you challenge them on their being dominated by feminist ideology, the first thing they do is get lawyerly. And this is what they're doing here. And it's a pretty disgusting. I'm wondering, next week, are we going to have perspective on race relations by interviewing a Klan member? Is that what Cafe is going to do next? Because this is the equivalent in my book. I mean, it's a lot more socially acceptable to hate on men, but it's no less hateful. It's no less bigoted than you would get out of the Klan or skinheads or any other organization that's known for overtly hating groups of people. This is hatred in action, and it's worse because at least we know the other kind of hatred's evil. This stuff gets passed off
It's
as
accepted.
decent.
This is
Accepted.
totally accepted.
Yep.
Yeah. And this guy can come on and say, I'm friends with people who write editorials in the Washington Post with titles like, Why Can't We Hate Men? Written by a feminist sociologist and women's studies professor at Northeastern University, Susanna Walters, and that stands as a feminist statement. It's not an ironic article. It's a perfectly straight out, presentation of why women are morally right to hate all men. And he's saying, I'm friends with people like that, and I'm so happy that they're letting us open a center where we can tell men that they're bad and that we may be able to help them be decent members of society if they accept our brainwashing. And that's allowed to stand by the interviewer. Now, I want to cut the interviewer some slack because I'm terrible in situations like this. If maybe he wasn't expecting all of this boilerplate feminist nonsense. And so I have been in situations where somebody says something just utterly repugnant and ridiculous, and I sit there with a smile on my face and my mind goes blank. I can't think of a single thing properly to say, to respond. Maybe that happened to that person, but I don't know what this interview is doing still up on the Cafe, YouTube site. They should have taken it down immediately and said, we're appalled that this man came on and said these things, and this isn't what Cafe stands for in any way, and we disavow it.
And I get that. I agree with you, Janice. We got to cut the interviewer a little bit of slack because, people do respond differently to different situations. And some people aren't as agile with responding to stuff like that as others. But let's be honest here, too. This video was done, recorded, reviewed, and posted with the knowledge of Cafe, and nobody saw anything wrong with it.
No.
Right.
They went ahead and put it up. And look, I'm just going to say it. That tells me everything about Cafe as an organization that I need to know. That this could go through their ranks and they're good with it, and that their reaction to people, because the comments are on fire with this thing, with people objecting to it and pointing out how wrong it is. And instead of taking it down or even having a moment of self-reflection and thinking maybe we should take this down, they put out this bullshit lawyer's description of why this really isn't our opinion. Bullshit. It is your opinion. It's on you, Cafe. It's totally on you right now.
We ready?
Yeah,
All right, let's see what comes next. Let me know when you want to stop.
Not all men do. We can derail a lot of these issues that are centered around men and make sure that they get the support they need and become the incredible members of society they can.
Uh-oh. Here we go again. Become the incredible members of society they can. I just thought I'd stop there for a second. Should we go ahead?
Well, I mean, it's so classic. If you'd looked for a classic statement of the feminist therapeutic approach to maleness, you couldn't have found something as good as this.
Right.
It's all here. Here's this idea that the only reason to help men is to make them better members of society, i.e., not to make them better as individuals, not to help them overcome the pain that they are experiencing because of their particular life circumstances, not because they are valuable as individual human beings who deserve not to suffer because of their experiences. No, they're only to be helped so that they can become more serviceable, so that they can stop harming women and become of greater use to society in general and women in particular, because that's what men are for. It couldn't be more clearly spelled out than in this statement about making them these incredible members of society so that they can do the work they're supposed to do. They can support women in the way they're supposed to. Wow.
Indeed. Well said, Janice.
And let's make something else clear here. And I think Tom will back me up on this. Your job in delivering mental health services is to see the pain that people have been in, to understand what shape though. I mean, because you in mental health provision, you work for people, sometimes they're very criminal. They've done very bad things. You work with all different kinds of people who have perpetrated really the types of problems that he's talked about. But what you don't do is to go in and look for their privilege or look for them to, beg for forgiveness and apologize for their maleness. What you do is you look at their lives. Very often you find they're the victims of abuse. And there's where you find things to work on with them.
Right.
You work on how they've been wounded by life, how things have hurt them, not their patriarchy theory and toxic masculinity and aggrieved entitlement and male privilege and all these other garbage concepts that have no use in a mental health setting whatsoever. That is, when we work with women, we don't try to work on female privilege. We work on what's happened to them, how they've been wounded in life, and to give them compassion and acceptance. Right. That's the whole point of this stuff. And I challenge anybody to listen to this son of a bitch talk and not know what he's up to. And it's not mental health treatment.
No. It's about brainwashing men to believe that they are always the problem, no matter what they have experienced. It's astounding and actually terrifying.
Indeed. Should we go on?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Well, that's a very optimistic message, and I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that you had a largely positive response.
Yeah, we honestly thought the opposite was going to happen. We were preparing for that. And it didn't.
So I think it kind of proves that men and women are not enemies. We're really allies, and doing good things for men does not take anything away from women. It doesn't harm women. In fact, it probably does the opposite, because if we have better men in our community who are more grounded, more mentally healthy, and have better behaviors, that's going to benefit everybody. Right, not just the men,
especially women.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's
and
stop
society.
it there.
So he didn't just not challenge them; he chimed in agreement.
Yeah,
it's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just so false. Everything that they say. Oh, isn't this great? Men and women aren't really enemies after all. Isn't that great? There is no gender war. The feminists are really just as interested in helping men as we are. Isn't that great? Except that the entire interview is all about you trying to appease feminists by agreeing with their vicious and hateful postulates. I mean, it's just so amazing. Obviously, if there were no war, then they wouldn't have been scared to death that merely opening a center for men's mental health services would inspire all this backlash and all that they'd be crucified, as he said.
That's it.
Can't they hear what they're saying? It reminds me actually of this event that I took place at Cafe in Ottawa, and it was David Shackleton, who was then the head of Cafe Ottawa, invited a woman, and I think she was an Anglican priest, if I'm remembering correctly, and she ran a center for homeless men. and it was called Center 454 in Ottawa. And he invited her to one of those, remember She for He, when those were really popular? And it was a panel discussion of women talking about why they cared about men's issues. And this woman agreed to moderate it. And the idea was that there was going to be some kind of association between Center 454 and Cafe Ottawa. And after the discussion, in which one or more of the women questioned the idea of male privilege and said that that was not a useful starting point to discuss men's issues, this woman told David Shackleton that she could no longer have anything to do with Cafe Ottawa because she could not give up the idea of male privilege. And this is a woman, just to say it again, who works with homeless men, men who are living in shelters. And she could not give up the idea of male privilege because that is absolutely necessary to understand everything about men's experiences in Canadian society. So, and so it's just amazing that these two scared guys, terrified of offending feminists, have to say that the fact they didn't get backlash for a center or for a clinic that's going to tell men that they're at the root of all social problems. The fact that they didn't get backlash somehow proves there is no gender war. Wow.
Okay.
Well, it's the same feminist logic that we've been dealing with for the past 50 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same shit, different day.
Yeah.
Indeed. Should we forge ahead?
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up.
Has pushed men into an area where they're less comfortable opening up and they're less comfortable showing stereotypically weak type behaviors. And that's probably part of the bigger issue in itself. And so if all people are supportive of men getting the help they so obviously need to improve their mental health function and then be better members of society, I think it would benefit everyone.
Okay. Men need to open up, Paul. They need
I know. They need to share their feelings.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's important. Yes, absolutely. If we need to give them a sit down of Old Yeller and make them watch that to get the wheels turning, we'll do that. But by God, these guys need to cry. And if they will just cry, they'll be mentally healthy.
This is the most.
In fact, I'll feel better as a counselor if the guys cry, because I'll feel like I was doing my job.
I did something.
I won't know whether or not that really helped, but if I can get them to cry, it'll make the women happy. Who loses?
This is the most narcissistic thing, for women to believe that men, in order for them to be better, need to be more like them. It's like, that's the narcissistic thinking right there, is that everyone needs to be like me. And if they're not like me, there's something wrong with them. My gosh, there's no one who is looking at how are men and women different. And is that not a good thing? They're not looking at that. They're only looking at, we need to make men more like women, have them open up and talk about their feelings. Ugh.
And demonstrating and saying that he has absolutely no awareness whatsoever of the male psyche, of what's really going on with men, with how they operate, how they grieve, how they heal, everything they go through in life. He has no clue whatsoever. His only answer is, you need to come to my group and gush about all the horrible things in your life. I'll tell you how it's all really your fault and you'll be healed. That's their version of this. It's an abomination.
No concept at all that the culture is judging men constantly if they open up about their feelings. He drops like a rock in the hierarchy. This guy's doing it. Women are doing it. Almost everyone is doing it. Men are judged repeatedly for opening up and being open, and someone out there will say, oh, not me, I don't judge that. Oh, yes, you do. You make it look like it's okay, but I'm telling you, that's the hierarchy right there. And he doesn't seem to have any clue about the hierarchy and what's happening with men.
No.
Yeah,
and I love the way
I tell men all the time that if they emulate, if they do what this guy suggests and what feminist therapy suggests, there's your perfectly guaranteed way to sleep alone in life.
That's it.
Because
That's it.
if
Bye.
you do what these guys are suggesting, women will reject you sexually. That's
Exactly.
all there is to it. And
That's
so,
correct.
again, it's not only bad mental health treatment, it's bad advice. It's a bad way of living for men. Men's strength is that they master their emotions. It isn't about
Yes.
repression. It's about internal control. It's about keeping emotions in perspective and operating on logic and reason. That's what makes men so great. I know that guys like this have been trained by feminists to believe just the opposite, but it's still true. This is what makes men accomplish things, and what makes them great. And yes, there are times when we do need to look at the emotional lives of men and provide outlets for that. But to treat that like it's the mainstay of everything and it's the only thing that men need is absolutely crazy.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, and again, the incoherence of his line of thought there. He talks about how society tells men that they shouldn't open up, so he's going to magically somehow solve that problem. But as you say, as both of you have already said, well, who is society? What makes up society? Who are these people telling men that they mustn't open up and reacting with scorn and revulsion and indifference if they do show inappropriate emotions? And is he really that interested in getting men to open up? If a man comes into his office and rages for an hour because he went through the divorce from hell 2 years ago, and he hasn't seen his children since that day in court when his wife made a false allegation against him, and so he rages about that for an hour, is this man really going to be satisfied? And what's he going to say to him when he opens up with his emotions of anger and grief? I don't see how his feminist framework is going to help him in any
Right,
way
right.
in that moment, or indeed in any of the discussions he's going to
Yes.
have with that grieving and angry man. So, it's
And this is where these guys never complete their own thoughts. I mean,
that's
he's
it.
got this model that he works by, but he doesn't take it to the end because we have a name for that part of society that tells men to be stoic and not express their feelings and to be strong no matter what. We have a name for them. They're called women.
That's right.
And when you go against that programming, again, to some degree, there's no getting around this. And this is something I never hear feminist therapists ever deal with or approach in any way. When men follow their directions, they will drop down, just like Tom said, in the hierarchy. They will become consider less, to have less sexual market value by women. That's the reality of what these
Yes.
guys are prescribing, is
Yes.
a one of sexual isolation and rejection by women. And I have never heard one of them honestly try to address that. They just won't, because what women are telling them they want is a shit test. What these guys are doing is repeating the women's shit test of, you've got to open up and show your feelings so I can decide you're a beta and reject you.
Yes.
That's what's
Yes.
happening there.
Exactly.
And these guys have no awareness of that, so because they don't understand women any more than they do men.
Yep. Yep. 'Tis true. And guys, think about this. Who has been the one to tell you you're not dealing with your feelings? It's mostly women. Have you ever had a man tell you that? I would bet no, you have never had that happen. Men don't do that. Women do. How
Yeah.
about that? Of course,
But
maybe
then
this
women
male
are
therapist
also-
might.
Male feminists do.
Yeah. And women are also the first to react very angrily and defensively when the man does attempt
Yes.
to articulate feelings that she
Yes.
isn't the least bit interested in hearing.
Right.
So when she talks about feelings, she's really talking about a very narrow window of acceptable expression
Oh, boy.
that she wants to dictate and
That's
control.
That's
And
it.
so unfortunately, that's what I'm hearing from Cameron Gibson too. And he's not somebody that I would want anybody I care about to go and talk to. I wouldn't believe that he's really equipped to help anyone in any way at all. And well, that's just a really very effective and quite horrifying example of what feminist psychoanalysis looks like.
And I'm sure the guy thinks that he's doing the right thing. I mean, I'm sure he thinks he's doing things for the right reason, but he really does have some
good men. Of course, he's doing it for the right reason.
He's got some growing to do, to understand men in a different kind of way, not in the feminist way.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Well, so that's that.
That is that. And
men
are
good. What's a big idea? Twice in a day.
And if anybody tries to tell you otherwise, you tell them to fuck off.
We ought to add that tagline. Yeah, that's good. Men are good. And if anybody ever tries to tell you differently, you tell them to fuck off. That's the masculine path. There you go.
Yep. You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.